I generally follow rules and I follow steps. And so I was giving them the answer like, well, in order to move up and be promoted, I must complete X, Y, and Z. So my goals are X, Y, and Z. And they were helping me see that you don't always have to follow the exact steps to get where you want to go.
That's Caroline Hanley, and this is the Powerful Ladies Podcast. Hey guys, I'm your host, Cara Duffy, and this is the Powerful Ladies Podcast, where I invite my favorite humans, the awesome, the up to something, and the extraordinary to come and share their story. I hope that you'll be left entertained, inspired, and moved to take action towards living your most powerful life. Caroline is a ray of sunshine. She's smart, funny, loves reading as much as I do, and is one of my dear friends. In addition to being a great human, she's an incredible account director at one of the most prestigious advertising firms, Mullen Lowe. In this episode, we talk about the power of curiosity, why arts in school matter, and how breaking the so-called rules can lead you to finding the path to discover how to be the best at your own life and business. All that and so much more coming up, but first. Being an entrepreneur or a small business owner is hard, but the good news is it's much easier when you have a coach and a community. The Powerful Ladies online community gives you both. It's where powerful ladies and powerful entrepreneurs from around the world discover clarity, produce results, and experience success at new levels. Because together we thrive. As a member, you get access to master a new skill for business every month, network, brainstorm, and collaborate with like-minded women, get access to Powerful Ladies events, our library, resources, and more. Participate in group coaching and workshops led by a multipreneur business coach. And you get the accountability and inspiration to stay on track and make it happen. Join today at thepowerfulladies.com. Hi.
Hello.
It is so nice to see your face.
It's so great. I feel like it's been a long time, but then time is really difficult to keep track of nowadays.
I think it's been a really long time. I honestly can't remember the last time that I saw you in person. It may have been
At the gym?
Yeah, like a year ago though. Like, I feel like it's been so long.
Was it when we were mermaids?
I think so.
And that was over a year ago? Yeah.
It'll be a year in like April.
Oh my gosh.
I know.
That's crazy.
Well, and since then, congratulations. You just got engaged.
Yes. Thank you very much. Very excited. Something good too. From this year.
Yeah, it was great. Bree told me and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited. And how long had you guys been dating?
13 years. So we were set up our high school senior prom, and we've been together since then. So
that's incredible.
Quite a long time.
Yes. Well, let's get into telling everybody who you are and what you're up to.
All right. Well, I'm Caroline Hanley. I am a fiance, a sister, an avid reader and book on tape listener, a beginning baker, a fitness enthusiast, a semi-retired dancer, and I work as an account director at Mullen Lowe, which is an advertising agency in LA.
I love it. Yes, and you're just also one of my favorite humans on the planet. So I'm very glad that you're here today. We've been trying to make this episode happen for so long. I've been like, you got to be on. You got to be on.
Yes, I'm so glad that it's working out.
Yes, me too. Well, let's dive into you and dance because I've met you through Bree and you and Bree met through dancing. What has your dance career been like and how did you get started?
Oh my gosh, I feel like it's too much to actually call it a career. But I appreciate that that's what you are saying. I started probably like a dozen other little girls in ballet class when I was 3. Probably because my parents needed somewhere to put me. But my parents are also very artsy people. And so I was in music classes I was in movement classes, dance classes, from an early age. And so I did the Nutcracker with, Southern California Dance Theater, was the small studio close by. And my younger sister, Marielle, who's 3 years younger than I am, she was also part of it. My parents were part of it, which was really awesome. My dad was Drosselmeyer in the Nutcracker for a number of years. And I love performing and dressing up. So putting all those things together and being on stage where people are clapping and loving it is like just fantastic. And then we moved. And so we stopped going to that ballet class. And instead, my mom put actually my sister first in a hip hop class through the city of Lakewood, here in Southern California, because my sister was much antsier than I was. I was very like focused and could listen and take direction. And my sister could not at that age. She can now. And she had so much fun because it's bouncier, brighter, happier, more energetic movement, and music. And because my sister was into it, then I got into it. And we did that for a number of years, basically up through middle school. So I abandoned ballet and was just doing hip hop, which is not like actual like street cred hip hop, like real stuff. It was really a lot of bouncing around, a lot of cardio exercise, but still movement to music, which was fun. And then in high school, I had to choose whether or not I wanted to do PE class or to join the dance program. And obviously I wanted to join the dance program instead of doing PE. And that is really where I fell in love with it. I had no idea what I was doing, but I took the summer camps that the teacher taught, Mrs. Jones at Los Alamitos High School, that she offered. And I think really from there, that's when I fell in love with the technique and trying to be better. And I was in that program all 4 years. I was on the dance team as a sophomore through senior year. And it's just so much fun because you're listening to like great music and you're moving around. And there's this really great cathartic feeling for me where it really feels like you can become another person when you're dancing. You forget about who is sitting in the room in front of you, and you're just focused on moving and making that movement feel as great as possible. So after high school, I went to Cal Poly San Luis Obispo for school and joined the dance company there. And took classes in addition to that. And that was very, very different. I feel like in high school, it was all about jazz and lyrical and moving energetically. You know, we're high schoolers, so we have endless amounts of energy and we don't get injured very easily. And then in college, it's all about learning how to preserve your body and move smarter and really warm up. And those were things that I really like mentally and physically was not ready to do when I was 18. I wanted to keep moving. And now looking back, I wish I had done that more, but at the time, I just wanted to keep moving more and keep pushing. And that wasn't the mentality of that particular dance company. But I still was dancing, still surrounded by very talented people, got to meet some great friends. But I would come home over the summer breaks and take classes at Jimmy DeFore Dance Studio in Costa Mesa. And that's where, again, from my sister, she had been taking class from Nate Hodges, who was teaching there and at Elevation Dance Studios in Long Beach. And so I was taking class with her because I'm just home for the summer and I'm going to do something with my sister. And I took Nate's class, and he's fantastic. For anyone who's listening who doesn't know Nate Hodges, just imagine the happiest, brightest soul, and then give him a really macabre and dark kind of interest level, and that's Nate. But he's so wonderful. And when I was taking his class kind of back and forth over the summers, and as I was getting ready to graduate, he asked me to be part of his dance company, Rhetorical. And I just remember I was so over the moon. It was a Facebook message that he had sent me, and I was up in college at the time, and my roommate was with me, and I got the message and I started reading it and kind of got down to the point where he was asking, will you be in my dance company? That sounded just like a proposal. That's not actually what the wording was, but I had to stop reading and make her read it because I was so excited. And so I joined the rhetorical dance company. I started at the very end of 2010 when I moved home after graduating, and that's right when they had started a new production of La Bayadere, and it was a jazz retake on the classical ballet, and it was phenomenal. It was the most complex and most complex, in-depth, talented group of people ever. And being surrounded by so many great and talented dancers just makes you want to be as good as they are, or at least not be the bad person in the back. And that's kind of how I was. And that's how I got really close to Bree and to Nate and a whole bunch of other people in the company, because they're just a family. It was wonderful.
Yeah. And having been someone who's had the pleasure of watching you guys perform, it's a different level of performance. Like you can tell that you guys have a different relationship than people forced to work together, or people who don't have a relationship. Like there's such a depth and an easiness to how you guys dance together that it changes how it occurs as a performance. And it's so noticeable. Yeah.
Oh, that's so great to hear. Yeah, I think that there's a maturity that comes with dancing like that, where you're really dancing with the people as people. They're not just another body on stage with you. If you're partnering with someone that is Jeremy, or that is Bree that you have to catch, and that really comes through because you don't want to, you don't want to let them down, and you want to make everything as best for yourself too.
Did you ever consider dancing as your day job career, as how you were making your income?
I thought about it, but I never really wanted to do that because I loved it so much, and it felt like the thing that was my escape from school, from work, that I felt as soon as I started to associate a paycheck with it, I would put so much pressure on myself that I would lose some of the fun, and I would lose kind of the creativity and the artistry because there would be too much pressure. Yeah. So I intentionally didn't pursue that. Sometimes I wonder, though, what would have happened otherwise.
Right? I mean, there's so many possibilities.
Yeah.
How did you end up in advertising?
By accident. I was an English major in college and didn't know what to do with that degree. My options, what I felt like in college, my options were becoming an English teacher, or going into law school, because that's typically what people do. And I wasn't really up for either of those things. And so I took an advertising class as it was a free credit kind of thing. And I figured, all right, well, if I have an English degree, I can write really well, and advertisements need people to write. So maybe I'll look into kind of that angle of it. And it was a fun class. And I was having actually Thanksgiving dinner with my best friend's family, and her uncle, this is a very long-winded story, her uncle was a client of a small agency in Irvine. And so, he's asking the whole question, what are you going to do when you graduate? And I'm saying, I don't know, but I'm taking this advertising class. And then he was the one who was like, oh, well, if you're interested, I can introduce you to the owner of the advertising agency that I'm working with, because maybe he can give you some advice and tell you what it's like in that industry, which was a wonderful offer for him to help me make that connection. So I met with the owner and just had coffee with him, and got to learn a little bit more about what advertising is about. And I loved the thought that it really requires a lot of left brain thinkers and a lot of right brain thinkers collaborating and working together. Because you have to have a creative idea, but then you also have to execute upon it in a way that a layman is going to understand. And there's a very heavy psychological layer in there too, where you're really trying to convince people. So I found that very interesting and captivating. And so I met he's a co-owner, so I met the partner. And they hired me to just work as the receptionist. I was part-time, and because they were so small, they were maybe 15 people at the time. I ended up doing more than just answering phones and leading people to conference rooms. I ended up looking at the work itself, whether they were presentation decks or if I sometimes was proofing social media posts, helping to find vendors. And so because I started taking on this miscellaneous role, I understood more and more about it. And then there was an account director at that agency, Deborah Buxton, and she, I think, saw potential in me or saw that I was bored at the front desk and basically took me under her wing and was like, I'm going to teach you what I know and you're going to help me. And so she got me into the account management department, and that's still what I do now. And that role is really difficult to describe because when I say it aloud, it sounds like I don't do anything. But
which is the farthest from the truth.
But like, I'm not the one that comes up with the creative idea. I'm not the one that outlines the strategy. I'm not the one who technically is producing or filming anything, but I am the main communicator who makes all of that stuff happen. My primary role is to communicate and to be the steward for the client, whoever that client is. They're typically in the marketing department of their company. And so I have to understand the business side of what they're going through and understanding those challenges, and then helping to facilitate with the whole rest of our agency team how we can solve for those business challenges. And so I have to be the glue and the facilitator and the leader and the listener kind of all at the same time. And so from that small agency in Irvine, I made connections with different people, moved to an agency in LA, where I got a ton of experience. They were really, really great for me to learn a shitload from. I really felt like I grew a lot there. And then most recently, 3 years ago, which is not super recently, but 3 years ago, moved over to Mullen Lowe, where I am right now. And I love it. I think specifically because you have to be both right-brained and left-brained at the same time. And even if it's not my primary job to come up with the creative ideas, I have to understand them and figure out how to make them reality. And I think that's what I like so much, is bringing those things to life.
Part of the reason why I think that you and I always have so much fun when we're hanging out together is that I think that our brains actually work very similarly, right?
Yeah.
Like we love reading, we love learning, we love like doing things, but making them as fun as possible when we have to do them. Like when we used to work out together, we'd be laughing more than we were working out,
I know.
I think. But we were there like, well, we have to do this. How do we make it fun?
Yeah.
And just the idea of like taking something from nothing, right? It's one of those skills that when people ask what's a superpower, I'm like, I can make something from nothing. And they're like,
my gosh,
what?
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, most people don't know how to be like, here's the idea. What do I do with it now? And the role that you have is so much that role. Like you are ultimately the producer of the entire show at the end of the day, even if you're not doing the individual parts. And I think I'm just fascinated by people who think similarly to how I do, because I don't think it's happens often. I bump into people like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that that's so very true. And I would say the flip side of that is because you have that capacity to think that way and to be creative and not get roadblocked super easily. I would say I think you would also have kind of trouble understanding how other people do get roadblocked, how they can't think that way too. Because I know I've run into that sometimes where it's so natural for me to call someone and talk through an issue and figure out a solution when that in itself could have stopped someone. And really it is so second nature. And sometimes I find it hard to remember that not everyone has that capacity. Not everyone has had that experience to know what to do. So it's a good reminder. But no, I think our brains are so much alike.
Yeah. No, and it's, and I also really appreciate people who, just like good old fashioned wholesome fun.
Oh my gosh.
Like,
Yes.
and it sounds so nerdy saying it out loud, but it's like some of my favorite times are just like game nights, which we've done with Bray and Nate, and I know that we've done with their own families. And there's so much, if we can be doing something and using our brains and having fun, that's like my favorite fun. If we have to, if it's sit around and hang out, I want to poke out my eyeballs most of the time. Like I'm such a pain in the ass when it comes to needing mental stimulation. And I think that's also why, like, whether it's physical things or a game or building something, I'm like, what are we doing?
Right. Yeah.
And
what's next?
Yeah. And I have to remember that everyone else doesn't need a what's next. I'm currently taking a psychotherapeutic yoga teacher training, which is actually incredible because it's brain science with insights into how therapy works, plus a regular on top of yoga teacher training. Highly recommend it. And it actually applies to my job way more than I thought it would, because we're doing so much about, as you mentioned before, like the persuasion and how you're helping people get from where they are today to where they want to go. And that we're focusing a lot on like anxiety and depression. But people get anxiety and depression every day in some capacity, right? So how does that influence customers and clients and whoever we're working with? But I'm bringing all this up because we were talking about the doshas of Ayurveda. And I'm reading the description of, I believe it's the Pitta, and I'm like, oh my God, that's me. Like, I've never had something like describe me in such a capacity where I'm like, this is better than my horoscope. Like, where did this come from? But it did speak to like always needing the next thing and like that. And I think also like the making something from nothing really comes from this determination of like, oh no, this is happening. Like other people were like, oh, maybe it's not supposed to happen. We're like, nope, this is what we decided. I've already chosen. It's happening.
Yep. Yes. I think we're not of the school of thought where it's like, if it's meant to happen, it'll happen. It's like, oh, I'm going to make it happen.
Yeah.
Or I'm intentionally not going to let it happen. There's definitely a factor of choice, which is huge in all of that.
When you look back at 8-year-old self, would she be surprised at anything that you are or aren't doing now?
Oh, I think so. My 8-year-old self, I think, was going to either be a librarian or an astronaut.
Same.
Really?
Yes, those were always on my list because I loved organizing the books and then reading them all.
Oh my gosh. I would make, you remember libraries would have the pieces of paper, the tabs that would go inside the inner cover with like the stamped dates for when they were due back. I would do that to my own home library. My mom got me the date stamp. And that's all I wanted to do. I wanted to organize the books by color or by author and read them, obviously. Yes. And then astronauts, I was always, my dad loves space. He worked at Boeing for a period of time and still consults with them. And so just through his interest and fascination with space and science in general, I always wanted to do that too. But I think that's so great, also thinking about being an 8-year-old girl and not being limited to what you wanted to be. It was like, yeah, of course I can be an astronaut, or I could be a librarian. I can do either of those things and be equally happy and thrive in each of those scenarios. Yeah, of course I didn't either, but
well, you still got to choose what you wanted, right?
True.
Yeah. And life is not over. So who knows what could be next? No, I feel like you and I are also really lucky in that we both had the exposure to books and TV shows and movies where girls got to choose,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like I always reference like Babysitter's Club and Nancy
Mm-hmm.
Drew as like,
Yes.
well, they can do whatever they want. Like for
Mm-hmm.
crying out loud, she's breaking into buildings. I think I can do what I want for work. So just having that exposure of, yeah, why not?
Mm-hmm.
And it's crazy to me when I run into people who also don't have that exposure or even had access to those things, but still don't think they can, which,
Mm-hmm.
as I've told you in the past, it's like the whole origin of Powerful Ladies. Like, what do you mean you can't? Like, who said no?
Right.
And I do have to say that a huge motivator for me is when people say no. And not that I like breaking rules, but if somebody tells me something's not possible,
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, yes, it is. And now I will show you how.
It's a challenge where you're
Yes.
saying, all right, perfect. You have outlined the norm for me, and I am going to prove to you that those norms can be broken down and we can build up something new.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. 'Cause that's what we do. We build things.
Mm-hmm.
With that mindset of like knowing that you could choose librarian or astronaut or dance or whatever it was that you wanted to do. When you look around at the world today, what are things that you get fired up about or frustrated about where you're like, you feel cause to, if not taking a direct action into it, you at least it's something that you are following or having conversations about?
That's a great question. I think arts in schools is one of those things that gets me because it made such an impact on my own life. And so I feel very passionately that if I didn't have art in school or out of school, I wouldn't be the person that I am today. And not just in terms of, if I would have danced or not. It's like, I don't think I would have been an empathetic person. I don't think I would listen in the same way. I don't think I would have the same range of emotions. Much more soft. They're like the soft, deep pieces of me, not just what my talents are. So I think that's pretty big for me. It's just so important for kids to get the exposure so they know that they have a choice. Not everyone is meant to be a great singer or to, play the recorder in a fantastic way. But having those building blocks and getting that exposure, I think is so important because it can be a huge outlet to artists. But it's also it gives you so much depth as a person. And I feel like that's really important. And that kind of goes hand in hand just with education in general. My dad is a professor at Cal State Long Beach. And so education is also one of those things that I think is really important. Obviously not everyone needs a college degree. I think our world has changed and you don't need to follow those exact steps in order to be successful. But continuing to learn and be curious about things and getting an education, whether it's formal or not, I think that's also really important. Because being stagnant and being satisfied with what you have, isn't going to open up opportunities for you. You're going to continue to work in the same playing field as what you currently have. But if you have that curiosity and you have that motivation and that drive to expand and try something new, that's where there are new opportunities.
And that's where I think there's so much magic, right? Like curiosity plus information and then the empowerment behind like, it's okay. Like you can go figure that out. You can read that. To me, that's like the magic formula of where anything is possible from. I look at education's such a big deal for me because of having both been to so many different types and sizes of schools growing up. We moved so much that I saw what it was like to be in a school where there was like 80 people in your class. Then I saw what it was like to be in a school with 700 people in your class, and access to lots of activities and sports and access to less, and like how it changed and impacted people. And it's the idea of, knowing, especially in places that are challenged economically, there's so much opportunity to escape mentally and literally and do whatever you want through that channel of education, and how it's not equal or encouraged or treated like this magical thing in all places, like, just breaks my heart.
Yeah. I guess in your experiences then, because you have such a wide variety, do you feel like that also played a really, or I guess how did the children's ages, how was that impacted? Because I imagine being younger and not having exposure and then getting it when you're older is going to be different than the opposite.
Well, if I think about, and you're asking about like ages to what type of school systems there were, and
Yeah.
Well, I'm also a big believer that kids are the smartest humans we have on the planet. Like, people are like, we shouldn't let 16-year-olds vote. I'm like, can we just ask 5-year-olds to vote? Like, I would be pro 10 and under making all political decisions going forward. Because they choose from their heart, right? They choose what will make more people safe and happy and all the things that they want.
Yeah.
So, having seen most kids come into school with so much opportunity ahead of them, and what takes it away is it either not being encouraged at school or not being encouraged at home. And even kids who I knew, being friends with them, had challenging home lives, they could still come to school, and if they had a great teacher, do great. Like, it could be a sanctuary. And then there were other kids who it got double compounded because they didn't have a good home life, and then they didn't connect or didn't feel heard from the teachers that they had. And it just, they double down on it not being worth it. But my experience has been that the smaller the school, even though you would think like, oh, that's less opportunities for people to have all these different programs, because there were less people, it meant that you needed everyone in a different way. Where if you wanted to have an art class, you had to get everyone to take the art class. And if you wanted to have a basketball team, you had to get everyone to play on the basketball team. And so there's a little bit of like coming together, and you can't hide the same way you can in a big school. So I think there's probably a magic number that education experts know what that is.
Right.
And I'm going to guess from my anthropology background that it has to do with the same number of like what a tribe equals, like 150-ish. I would guess they're about the same, because it has to do with how many people you can remember and connect with and have a relationship with at any time. And that's probably, there's a magic formula in there of how to make it work. I think it's frustrating to me that so often education becomes about money and about right now versus what we're creating later. Because we had Cheryl Wilby on recently from Soulfire Farm, and have you listened to that one?
Not yet.
Okay, but we talked about how nutritious food and land ownership can change equality, and they're like the simplest things. Like, it doesn't require restructuring all these huge, complicated systems. It's like, no, give people real food and let them have a farm or let them have a house, and things will change. And I feel like education's that same thing. Like, it's one of the foundational issues versus a symptom. So why don't we just fix that?
Yeah. No, that's a really good point. It feels like it should be so much simpler than what the issue actually is, because as you said, money and where the money is coming from and where it's going and how it's being prioritized and if it's being equally distributed or not. All of those complexities, all the politics, feels like it's getting in the way of something that I feel like is so fundamental, and that everyone deserves to have, a strong education.
And
at
it
least
sounds
the
like,
opportunity.
yeah, exactly. And it sounds like you and I have also had really lucky experiences where we've had parents in the education system who passing on education mattered. And I know like my parents, or at least my mother, was like super involved in, she used to make us do school before we were in school. We had to do summer school. Like, I think when she didn't have her outlet to teach, she's like, that's it. You're my students. Let's go. um, so, to me, one of the biggest revelations for this year has been, while it feels exhausting and daunting sometimes, it's reminded me that anything we care about, we have to be active in, even to some capacity. And I think that that's another thing that happens with education, where people think, okay, the school's there, like I'm done.
Right.
And whether you have kids in school or not, we can't say it's done. Like, how do we know it's actually being handled unless we're either even just voting for people on the school board? Like, it doesn't, there's so many ways to take an action in that direction. And, right now, like, we have to be participating in what matters, at least to us.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like that's such a good observation that you made about quarantine in 2020. Like, you really have to go out of your way to pay attention to the things that matter to you. Otherwise, it's so easy to just let them fall by the wayside, because of the physical confinement, and mentally everyone is so, I think, tapped out on a lot of things.
Yes.
You have to realize what matters and then pursue that, which I think has been actually very freeing for me personally. It's been nice that I've been able to let go of the things that don't matter, that I was holding on to because of appearances or out of habit, and realizing what does matter and what is important, and figuring out how to make an impact in that way.
Do you feel like you've kind of reconnected with who you are this year as a result of being stuck with yourself?
In some ways, yeah. In other ways, I feel like at the same time, I don't know who I am, and what I want to be, because it's kind of that, the deconstruction before the reconstruction. And right now I feel like I'm a little in pieces. I'm in transition, I would say, in figuring out, what the next reiteration of myself I'm really going to be. But it has been, there's a lot of self-reflection. There's a lot of feeling limited. There's a lot of feeling limitless. It really is kind of all of those things in a single day sometimes.
I find that so profound, of how, by the sake of taking away the routines that we had, that I have felt more emotions this year than I think I have in a decade.
Yeah.
Because you're so true. Like, you can have all the feelings in one day or in 1 hour based on what's happening. And it feels, I've been referencing it quite a bit, of how it feels that we've done in 1 year what would take a decade, both what we've had to learn and adjust to. And we've, like, everyone's leveled up, like, over and over and over again. Cause there's been so many, just when you think that this year is like, oh, we got this, then it's like, just kidding.
Right. Something else.
Yeah.
Something
you have
else
passed to level 3. Congratulations.
Right.
You're like, no, I didn't want to go to level 3 yet.
Yeah. I need a breather. I need a little bit of a break.
Yes. Within that space, when you think about powerful and ladies as words, separately and together, what do they mean to you?
So the word ladies, my first thought is, being a old bookish person. It makes me think of, like Jane Austen, ladies, Downton Abbey, one of my favorite shows. Really, the rich upper class. But obviously there's so much more to it than that, but that's I think one definition. um, Fun. Ladies are always fun. Um, Powerful. Powerful, I think, can be obviously, like, there's imagery of like lions and strength and not letting uh being the captain of the guard who, you know, can overcome challenges. But I feel like, at least for myself, I have found people to be most powerful and impactful when they have a more subtle approach. I feel like my grandmother, for example, is not someone who I would say is physically powerful. She's 91 years old, so, you know, there's only so much you can do. But she is the person who holds the family together. She's the one who calls everyone every single day. She is the one that motivates people to do better. She is the one who gives quiet, small reprimands when they're needed. And to me, that's very powerful. I think because it's impactful. So I think I would say that that association is probably most significant for me. And then together, powerful ladies. Well, first, ladies being plural, like having that whole community and the collaboration that comes with that. Just really, as you said, like having a tribe to rely on, and people to be inspired by, and people to mentor, I think is really, really great. And obviously, the association of powerful ladies is something that I always make with you, because I feel like I remember hearing you talk about powerful ladies, like basically from the beginning, and to watch it grow into the empire that you have now is so wonderful.
Well, it's very nice of you. Thank you. And you mentioned the plurality. What have the women in your life meant to you, and how have they helped you get to where you are today?
They mean so much. And I feel like there are so many people who have played a significant role. Even if that significant role is for a short period of time, you know, it can be someone. I have a first grade teacher who was very strict, but always would push her students to do their best. I had a coworker who I remember one time asked me, you know, what are your goals? What are your ambitions? And I remember giving a very like canned answer, of, you know, I want ownership of blah, blah, blah. And I want to have a better relationship. And they're like, no. You want to be the best. And that flip of mentality really made a big impact on me too.
Can we talk about that for a second? I think that's really important.
Yeah.
So when someone said to you, you want to be the best, where were they saying that from? And what did you make that mean when you heard it?
I think they were observing in me what I couldn't recognize myself. But they were seeing that I generally follow rules and I follow steps. And so I was giving them the answer like, well, in order to move up and be promoted, I must complete X, Y, and Z. So my goals are X, Y, and Z. And they were helping me see that you don't always have to follow the exact steps to get where you want to go. And if you know what you want to do, then there are so many ways to get there, and so many avenues and so many opportunities that you can take a hold of and make that change. And that's kind of what we were talking about earlier, where, you know, I didn't always think that way. I didn't always have that same ambition. And that person was really pivotal in helping me understand that, I could do so much more. And I took their comment as saying like, oh, I can do so much more. I don't need to follow the same mold. I can, and that will help me progress, but I have to have something larger to aspire to. And I feel like that's something that I still think about every once in a while. If I feel like I'm not doing the best that I can be on any given day, it's something that I reflect on where it's like, okay, how can I be the best? Because the best doesn't always mean checking 3 boxes. It sometimes means something so much more.
And do you evaluate just your career, or do you evaluate all the parts of your life by asking questions like that?
Like all aspects of my life at different times. All at once would be a little overwhelming. But I feel like that's something if I'm having an argument, and I often will be the one who overreacts or gets more emotional. I try and stop and think like, okay, how am I reacting? Like trying to look at it objectively and see how can I be the best partner, the best sister, the best daughter, the best coworker in this scenario. And oftentimes that requires for me to apologize, and listen to the other person and try and resolve whatever the issue was. But yeah, just trying to figure out how can I be the best? And the best means different things, different things in different scenarios, whether it's work or personal life. And also depending on the situation where, being, I entirely lost my train of thought. And like trying to define the best is difficult because I feel like it changes so often. There's no one way to be the best.
No, I totally agree. Right? It's just a marker. It's a check-in question.
And
I love that you that we're using the phrase "the best," because I think so often people get uncomfortable saying they want to be the best, or how can I be the best? Because we put it into the space of being competitive or someone having less than. Like if we're the best, you can't be the best. And that's not at all what I hear and what you're sharing right now. And I think it's really important to point that out because I think it's so powerful to ask yourself, am I being the best that I can be? Am I, whatever we're doing, are we doing it just because it's something to pass the time, or is it something because we really want to have mastery in it and feel confident in it? And there's so many people that come to me and what the coaching is required comes down to confidence. And you can't coach people to have drive. And there's this piece of like, do you want to be the best? Like, do you want to surprise yourself?
Yeah.
Go see how far you can push it. If you play, I'm going to win. Just see, like, because you can win and have good sportsmanship. You don't need to step on people along the way.
Right.
But go see how far you can push it.
It's being competitive with yourself, I think, more than with the person next to you, because you're right. You don't really want to step on other people in order to climb to the top. But challenging yourself and being competitive. And as you said, how can I be the best that I can be? What's my best? I think is, a good way to think about it, because then you're just trying to make yourself better. And you're usually doing it for yourself and for other people. I feel like leading by example is also important. So if you're pushing yourself to be the best, you're going to inspire someone else. And that, you never know how much of a powerful and impactful moment that can be on someone else's life. And it's all about, sharing that inspiration. But I would say you mentioned that it's hard to coach someone to have drive. But I feel like you're also really good at helping people find the thing that drives them. And that's something that I've noticed about you. It's not just about helping people figure out the logistics of like what to do next, but you ask really good questions and bring up really good conversation topics that kind of helps those people find that spark that will give them drive and motivation to do their best.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a perfect segue to what are the things what motivates you to be your best? Like when you look at what is it that lights your fire other than personal competition? Like what else is it? Like what's the why behind the choices that you're making and what you're creating next?
The people like in my life. I want to be the best for Cody, my fiance. I want to be the best for my sister. So she has a role model to look up to. I want to be the best for my friends because I think they're the best. And you always want to reciprocate that for them. I want to be the best for my coworkers so that they have someone who they can trust and rely on, and someone who can mentor them. And yeah, it's the people. I love being able to see how my role is kind of reflected in their actions, and how it makes that impact. I think that's the best.
Well, and it brings me back to what we started talking about in regards to dance and how you didn't want to be the one at the back. You didn't want to be the one weighing everyone down. And that's a huge motivator for me, especially when I never danced, but playing lots of team sports, it's the same thing. Like you realize what a contribution you are. Or if you don't use the word contribution, you know the impact you have.
Right.
And you don't want the impact to be bad.
Right.
When I was at Reebok, my wall buddy, Stephanie, and I, we were divided by a partition with our cubicles. But we were peers, like doing the same job role, but for different categories. And we did a lot of data entry in this job. We were project managers for apparel. And every week, there would be this list that would come out if any of the data was incorrect, like it wasn't working somewhere else. And she and I are both competitive people anyway, but we'd be like, we cannot be on the loser list. That's what we called it. And the list would come out. And if you were on it, you were like, shit. And like, you would go and fix it right away. Cause you're like, this has got to go away. But like, and if we weren't on it, it was like, okay, phew, we can keep going. But I really relate. It sounds so horrible. I'm sure there's a therapist that would scold me for using this term loser list, but it really did motivate you to be like, no, I'm going to get my shit done, do it correctly. Because if I don't, that means somebody else has to work until who knows what on a Friday. And I don't want that to be the impact that I'm making.
Right.
And so many places I've worked, if the group is operating at a high level, it really is this all boats rise. So if we're all pushing ourselves individually, not to the point of like having a mental breakdown, but if we're all committed to rising and moving forward, that's also another place where I think magic happens. And I'm sure you see in the results that get produced at work and also what you've seen in dance.
Yeah, no, absolutely. When you have everyone who's working towards the same goal, and when all of those people understand what their role is to get you to that goal, that really is where the magic happens. And to have a team like that, it makes all the difference because that's when you can have fun too. You're not as stressed about worrying if you're doing something right or doing something wrong, or is it the right decision? You probably think those things anyways, but when you know your goal and you can rely on the people around you to like kind of check you, if it's like, hey, that doesn't make sense, then you're working towards achieving that thing together. And that's, I think, when the success, the show, the commercial, when everything feels so much sweeter. Yeah. Because you really cross that finish line as a team. It's so cliche, but that really is what it feels like. When there were a couple rhetorical shows where it really was a very collaborative effort. Everyone is building sets together, and everyone is pulling their own weight, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
and because everyone wants it to be a success. And that's also the camaraderie that you have amongst people that you spend a lot of time with,
Mm-hmm.
open up to, and work hard with.
And most people, when they think of advertising, they have lots of ideas, right? They think either Mad Men or they think good things, they think bad things. I've crossed paths with lots of advertising agencies with the brands I've worked at. It's definitely a place that can be competitive and creative, and there's so many personalities. So when
Mm-hmm.
the fact that you're able to even bring all those people together is like a small miracle. Every project, I imagine.
Yeah, because you have a different combination of personalities each time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so dependent on the clients as well, actually. And I really don't know if clients understand how much of an impact they make on the rest of the team.
Mm-hmm.
But if they're stressed and they push that stress onto the agency team, then we are working under that stressful pressure, and
Mm-hmm.
it impacts the end result. But yeah, it's a lot to deal with. Some days more than others, but usually I'm lucky enough to work on one client where we have kind of main leads who are consistent across all the projects, and then you have other individuals that kind of come in and out
Mm-hmm.
depending on what the project is and what the specialty that's required. So when we have kind of three main people who are always, we're the stabilizers, I think, in everything.
Yeah.
And if we're all on the same page, then we can help keep the whole team on the same page, which is really key,
Mm-hmm.
especially when people are working on a bunch of different projects and schedules are erratic, and things just change so quickly. I
Yeah.
think especially this past year, brands had to be very reactive
Yes.
to COVID. And a lot of times it was very difficult, especially at the beginning, to understand what the right message was going to be to say
Mm-hmm.
for each brand in their different scenarios. And so having my counterparts, my creative and my strategic counterparts who I could trust and rely on was so needed when everything else was always in flux.
Mm-hmm. Well, and being on a similar path this year, right? Of like, well, you're pivoting all of your brands, I'm pivoting all of my clients, plus
Mm-hmm.
my own brands. And it felt like every time we got clear on what messaging might be safe, we had to throw it away and start over
Yep.
again.
I think it really was about prioritizing.
Mm-hmm.
And as you said, like you have to make a choice early enough in advance that you can be thoughtful in what you are saying and what you're creating. Because I
Mm-hmm.
think the worst thing would be to say like, oh my gosh, we have to say something about Black Lives Matter right now, but it would be so cobbled together and thoughtless that it is then disrespectful and
Mm-hmm.
not helping the cause, because you're not really putting enough thought into that message and into that
Mm-hmm.
craft. So prioritizing, delegating was also really important. When we were speaking with the clients, um, we would have conversations where the agency would take on some messaging that was going to be a little bit more like longer term. We knew um, this is eventually what we're going to be saying. We just don't know
Mm-hmm.
exactly when.
Mm-hmm.
And then the client's team would take on some of the more day-to-day, quick reaction kind of
Yeah.
things. And I think that was also really helpful just to understand who was focusing on what,
Mm-hmm.
so that you just are able to stay in your lane in a way, in a constructive way,
Yes.
where you're not worrying about things that you don't need to. So I think that was really key. And then just asking people how they're doing on a daily basis was also something that I started to do
Mm-hmm.
with my own team and with the clients, because you don't know how everyone's emotions were affecting them
Mm-hmm.
each hour, let alone each day.
Yeah.
So I think that was also helpful, just to have an open space where people could say, I'm going to take this call with my camera off, and
Yeah.
giving them the space to do that, because that also helps the work at the end of the day. If each individual feels safe enough to to live in whatever emotion that they're feeling,
Mm-hmm.
rather than trying to strain themselves in terms of stepping up. There's just way too much happening. And I feel like that helped everyone feel comfortable, for the work too, to have conversations about the work.
Yeah. I mean, business is not without being human,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Like ultimately it's all humans trying to talk to other humans.
Yeah.
So-
Yeah.
and I think it's silly when we try to remove that too much, right? And having people and then processes and then whatever the results are being the order really matters, because you can't get things done by yourself. And if you're forgetting that you're doing all of this to talk to people out there, then you forget about the people as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Exactly.
So as we look into what you're creating for what's next for you, like what do you have on your agenda for 2021, or even just what's next? Like what are you excited to be creating and putting together?
Well, wedding planning will be one thing. I think that's something I'm really excited about. I don't really know how to get started, especially with the pandemic. Usually you have to pick a venue and a date, and I don't know how to do that right now, where people would be able to come. But I'm super excited about that. Still on a personal level, Cody and I are looking at moving. So trying to figure out all of the ins and outs of that. And I think next year, I definitely want to spend more time, I think, figuring out what else I can do, like that side hustle that Powerful Ladies always talks about. I want to do that a little bit more, because I'm not dancing on a regular basis anymore. I need to do something for myself. I need to have that passion project, that I can put a lot of energy in, and whether that I dabble in calligraphy. So whether it's something along those lines, if it's something crafty, or if I can find another organization where my skill set will be applicable, I would love to do that. But yeah, I think I need to focus on feeding my soul again, in a different way.
Yeah. I know, it's like I feel like we've all gotten really good at being like homesteaders this year.
Yeah.
And I think next year I'm like, can we just layer on like engaging with people like in real life? I just want to do that. Like we don't even need to go back to like all things are normal. I just want to layer on a little bit.
Right. Yeah. Just a little bit more interaction, and a little bit more forward moving action. I think that's also something that people have lacked this year, because it feels like we're, as you said, like we're just in this cycle where we have stay-at-home orders. We don't have stay-at-home orders. You can go out and support local businesses, but no, you can't. There's so much back and forth that it will be nice to feel like we're making some progress.
Yes.
Both in terms of COVID, but like in our own lives too. So I'm looking to find that.
Yes, me too.
Connect me. People.
I do. I do. And then we ask everyone on the podcast where you rank yourself on the Powerful Lady scale. 1 being average everyday human and 10 being the most powerful lady possible. How would you rank yourself today? And how do you think you rank yourself on average?
Today I feel like probably like a 7. I feel like it's still morning, still a lot to still be done. And I think on average, I feel like I'm higher, maybe like an 8.5. But yeah, feeling pretty good.
I like it. What are things that make you feel powerful?
Accomplishments. Yeah. Getting a thank you from people, like acknowledgement that that they're recognizing something that I've done. Doing something that makes me feel warm and fuzzy inside, if it's volunteering, if it's talking to an old neighbor for 20 minutes because they need someone to talk to. checking things off of my to-do list.
Yes. I know. I have my done list, which I've been doing during COVID, and it's so much better than a to-do list some days. Like I go back and forth. I always have a to-do list because I have to keep track of all the things. But on days where I'm like, I need to be like moving, my done list changes everything because I record everything I did. Like, oh, I showered and got dressed today. Oh, I had this meeting. That's done. That's done.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's not. I stole this idea from Marina Sturdivant. She, one of our podcast guests in the past, and she's a Powerful Ladies community member. But yeah, when you are feeling stuck, a done list can change everything because you realize like, oh shit, I haven't sat down all day. So I should have a list of things.
That's great. I feel like that's a wonderful tool to feel like you have, I guess, not to feel like you've accomplished anything, but to realize what you have accomplished throughout the day. Because depending on how you're feeling, showering and getting dressed, not something I do every day. So that is in itself an accomplishment.
Yeah. It's like today I am not wearing leggings.
Yes.
Not that there's anything wrong with that, but it does change. Just change all things. And because we both love books, are there any books that you're reading right now or any books you've read this year that you have totally loved?
Yes. Always. I loved A Gentleman in Moscow.
Ooh.
It is not an action-packed book at all, but it is so wonderful. It follows the story of a Russian royalty or some kind of higher upperclassman who, for political reasons, is confined to a single hotel. And while at first it feels like his life is now confined to a single place, it actually opens up his life so much more because he gets to know people on a much more intimate level. And kind of his world is turned upside down where he used to be upper class, and now he's really he ends up having to work at the hotel, and that whole story was just so wonderful. I loved that. And then A Man Called Uwe by Frederick Beckman, I think. Jordan, we might have to double check that. It was also really wonderful about like an old grouchy man who has new neighbors move in and who entirely change his life. I loved both of those. And then Robert Galbraith's books, The Cuckoo's Calling and The Silkworm, that series. I haven't read the latest book, but it just came out, I think, a month and a half ago or so. So that's on my reading to-do list. Those are like murder mystery thrillers. So I'm excited. Yeah.
Do you use Goodreads, the app?
I have it, but I haven't been very good about using it. Do you find it useful?
I've been using it since 2006.
Okay.
So, but I use it really just to track every book I read because the librarian in me wants to know every book I've ever read. I heard a story that my great grandmother read all the books in her like neighborhood library. And I've always been like, is that possible? Like, I remember when I had Sasha Sagan on and we talked about how sad we are that we know that we will not get to read all the books that are available to us to read because it's like physically impossible. And like, we're sad about that. But I like keeping track because similar to your timestamp, I write my name and date in every book. And when people borrow them, I ask them to do the same. So you can like see who's touched a book. So I use it to track it. So mostly it's me putting all the books I've read when I read them. And also they have like the reading goal list every year. And my biggest failure last year was that I didn't achieve my reading goal. So this year I was like, that's it. This is absolutely happening. So I've already achieved it. I was like very aggressive. But it made me so mad. Of all the things that happened, I was like, what? Like, this matters. Reading matters so much to me. I have all these books to read. I didn't even hit my number. Yeah. This is the type of being the best that I was talking about earlier. My chair is totally sunk. Okay. With the COVID, there is a shortage of desk supplies. So I'm using my old chair, and my old chair just keeps sinking as I sit in it.
If it makes you feel better, I was using a camping chair for a while at first, and that did not help my back at all. It was not good.
Yeah, I recently have moved from being at a counter height desk. Like, I was working in our dining space for a while. So my legs weren't touching the ground, and that was causing some like hip flexor issues. And so now I'm moving slowly back into my office, which is why it's like nothing's in here, as you can see on the Zoom. So I can now, my feet are now on the ground, but I sink throughout the day. So it's like everything else in COVID. You're like figuring out, pasting it together, duct tape. But Goodreads I just use for tracking. And I also use it to list all the books people recommend so I can find them later. So I just use it for listing purposes.
Yeah. I end up using Audible kind of for that, because I like to read physical books, but then also listen.
Me too.
And so I usually end up finding them on Audible and saving them like to my wish list, and then using that as my tracker. Yeah.
It was good. It took me a while to switch over to listening to books. And I much prefer it when they're educational than like more novels. Because most of my books tend to be nonfiction. And like, even, we'll cut this out of the thing, but you can see how I'm like writing all over this book. I mean, technically this is a textbook. It's like anatomy, but I tend to write in a lot of my books. It used to be pencil, but I gave that up because pencil's hard. So I do like having a book, but the best one I read this year was Where the Crawdads Sing.
Oh yes, that one was so good.
And Educated. Have you done Educated yet?
No, I haven't.
Okay. Listen to that one, because the voice changes how you hear the book.
Oh, okay.
But in a good way.
Yeah. I love when you have a good narrator. Okay. Educated. I will write that one down.
Yeah. That one's fascinating. So yeah. So hold on. I got totally sidetracked, started talking to you like normal conversations. Let me want to wrap this up. Well, I guess, for everyone who's listening, right, who hears your story of, having this your dance career, having your advertising career, and creating a life that's based on you being the best you can for the people in your life that you care about. How can they incorporate some of that into their life? And are there any tips or tricks you recommend for, the best practices or rituals that you have that allow you to stay in that space?
Get enough sleep, I would say. Get enough sleep and exercise so that you feel like physically optimal. I think always trying to be kind is really key. One of the things that I learned from actually Brené Brown's book, Dare to Lead, was sometimes the best way to be kind is to be clear, even if that means you're saying something constructive, but not positive praise. So being kind and being a good listener, because when you listen to people around you, then you'll really, I think, understand them better. And that's also how you can figure out how to help them the best, and how to be the best version of yourself for that person. You have to make that a reciprocal relationship. It's not just about being the best for you. It's listening and observing the people around you. And eat dessert, because that just makes you happy.
It does make you happy. Well, as always, it has been such a pleasure to spend time with you today. Thank you so much for being a guest in the Powerful Ladies podcast, and I can't wait to see you soon and give you a big hug.
Oh, I know. I can't wait. Well, thank you so much for having me. This was really great.
Did you know there are over 40 songs with the name Caroline in them? After this episode, I think we all know why. If you don't have at least a little baby crush on Caroline now, I'm not sure you're a warm-blooded human. As always, she is smart, lovely, and being around her reminds me to be better. If you would like to connect, support, or follow Caroline, you can follow her on Instagram at CM Hanley. Her Facebook, LinkedIn, and email are all available at thepowerfulladies.com/podcast. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Powerful Ladies podcast. There are so many ways you can get involved and get supported with fellow powerful ladies. First, subscribe to this podcast anywhere you listen to podcasts. Give us a 5-star rating and leave a review on Apple Podcasts. Follow us on Instagram at Powerful Ladies. Join the Powerful Ladies Thrive Collective. This is the place where powerful ladies connect, level up, and learn how to thrive in business and life. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube page, and of course, visit our website, thepowerfulladies.com. I'd like to thank our producer, composer, and audio engineer, Jordan Duffy. Without her, this wouldn't be possible. You can follow her on Instagram at Jordan K. Duffy. We'll be back next week with a brand new episode. Until then, I hope you're taking on being powerful in your life. Go be awesome and up to something you love.